This is The Speaking Show. I'm David Newman, and you're tuned in to the #1 podcast for speakers, consultants, and experts who want to speak more profitably. Speaking. Here we are on The Speaking Show, and we have a guest who is a speaking guru. I don't know what to do, but please welcome Michael Davis, speaking CPR.
Thank you, David. It's always good to interact with you and talk with you, my friend.
So I would love to hear about your professional journey that brought you to the work that you're doing today. What was the backstory? Kind of how did you come to be the speaking CPR guy?
It started in October of 1994. I was a certified financial planner at the time. And part of my job, David, was to give retirement planning workshops in the community. One morning, my boss called me into his office, sat me down, handed me a stack of papers and said, "We need to talk." Always a good way to start a conversation. I started flipping through them and I noticed right away, these are the evaluations from my last workshop. And people had written comments like, "Does this guy ever take a breath? Dude, stand still. Too much, too fast, feel like I've been hit by a fire hose." And I read through a few more. And I thought, oh my God, this is terrible. I looked at my boss. I said, "Joe, should I keep reading? Is there anything good in here?" He said, "Oh yeah, there's a really good one." So I flipped through and there it was. And I looked at it and I said, "Are you kidding? This is it?" He said, "Yeah, pretty good, isn't it?" Somebody had written, "Mike has nice hair." And for a financial advisor, that's okay, maybe helpful, but that wasn't what I was looking for. So our conversation ended with him saying to me, "Look, we hired you to bring people through the door. You're not getting it done. Fix this or else." Very touchy-feely guy. So out of desperation, I started calling some friends, and that led me to the organization Toastmasters. And very quickly, I learned that speaking is a learnable skill. I didn't know that. I just thought you were born as a great speaker. Eventually got involved with the NSA. And along the way, I discovered that I had a talent for it. I just needed to be molded and needed great mentors and teachers along the way, which I found, fortunately. And then one day I realized people were coming to me asking me for insights. So I thought, okay, I've got some skill here too. And I developed those. I got certified as a coach back in 2011. And I made the full commitment in 2018 to retire from financial planning and do what I do today. But it all started because I was a lousy presenter.
Isn't that funny? So many of our guests echo the same path, which is the reason I'm so great at what I'm doing today is because I used to suck at it. I used to be absolutely terrible.
Yes.
And when you're sick of being terrible and you dedicate yourself to becoming awesome, you become awesome, fairly quickly.
I think it's one of the advantages is that we know how it feels to suck and we can relate to people. And I always keep that on top of mind as a coach is that when people come to me, I remember what it felt like to be insecure, fearful, and think, God, you're awful. Nobody could be worse than you. It does provide good context.
For sure. Well, and also empathy. So from a coaching and a consulting standpoint, I think one of the biggest coaching and consulting strengths is, as you're saying, it's empathy and really understanding what it's like not to know what you know today and understanding what it's like not to be able to do what you are able to do today and that others are coming to you to learn. So
that's one of the reasons I love working with you is you tell your backstory of those first few years, I think your first 3 years, and it's like, yep, he's singing from the same hymnal as me.
Totally. Well, let's talk about learnable skill, speaking, presentation skills, learnable skill. The other learnable skill that I know that you are awesome at teaching your clients and audiences, a lot of people might not think is also a learnable skill, which is storytelling. Right? Yes. We talk about the gift of gab. We talk about, he's so engaging. He's so, he really draws you in when he tells the story. And I just wish I had that special sauce, that magic DNA. And it's not special sauce. It's not magic DNA. It's something that you teach and you coach and you mentor your clients around all the time. Why do you think storytelling is shrouded in this kind of mysterious aura of, wow, some people have it, some people don't. I guess I can never learn that?
It's for what you just said. We listen to the terrific storytellers, or we watch the great movie which a director and writer put together, and we believe falsely, oh, that's not me. When the truth is, each of us is, and I know it's cliche at this point, Lisa Krohn wrote the book, we're wired for story. I mean, research is showing this now that our brains are attracted to story, and we are storytellers. We've been telling them ever since we could first talk, and we told our parents, no, I didn't take the cookie. The dog ate it. So we started very remedial with our stories and we built them. I think the biggest reason, though, David, is we don't see the power of our stories. We watch the movies or we hear the story of the Olympic gold medalist who overcame great obstacles, the blind man who climbed Mount Everest. And we think, I got nothing like that. I've just had an ordinary life. Or where I really learned the value of story and why we don't see it is from my own mother. Mom was born into German-occupied France during World War II. And about 20 years ago, we were sitting in my very comfortable, fully air-conditioned home in northern Cincinnati, about a mile and a half from the closest grocery store, which are important elements for this story. And she's telling me how every night when she and her parents went to bed, the air raid sirens would go off, right? That meant they had to run down 22 steps in pitch black, because it was blackout conditions, run across a big parking lot into a bomb shelter. They did that most nights. In the morning, after that carnage, they would wake up and the question of the day was, are we going to eat today? And they'd walk about a half mile into the neighboring village. And if they were having a good day, some potatoes would have fallen out of the bags on the supply trucks for the German soldiers. And sometimes it was a potato that they split and ate that day. So here we are sitting in my nice, comfortable home, a mile and a half from the closest grocery, open 24/7. And I'm thinking, oh my God, how did you do that? How did Grandma and Grandpa do that with you and Aunt Nicole? She looked at me for the longest time, David, and finally said, well, honey, that's just what we did. That was the moment I realized she didn't understand the power of her story. And it gave me great insight to all the people I talk with. None of us truly sees the power in it. Other people do, but we don't. And I think that's one of the reasons we need somebody. I'm not just saying go run out and get a coach for this reason, but somebody who can understand there's power in that story. We just can't see it.
Amazing. Really, really powerful. And even as you were recounting and sort of reliving that story, two things occurred to me where I think people are stuck. And I'd love to kind of dig into both of these aspects of storytelling. One is exactly what you just said, surfacing the content that we might not give credit, like, well, that's just kind of how it is. That was no big deal. But that's really either fascinating or compelling or educational or inspiring to other people. So there's the content, surfacing the content, and how do we kind of surface that content? And then there's actually crafting the story and, the speaking of it. And, you just did a master class. If people were paying attention, they should go back, they should rewind and listen to Michael's use of voice and imagery and a sense of place and the sensations, right? Running down the stairs, blackout conditions, pitch black, across the parking lot, into the bomb shelter. Potato falls off the German supply truck. Some days we had to split the potato. So it's things like the narrative and the detail and the color and how to put not too much detail, but enough so the story comes to life. So all of those, the presentation of the story. So when you're coaching your clients, let's talk about both aspects of that. Mm-hmm. One is kind of the content discovery process. And the other is the how do I craft this into a compelling 3 to 5 minute part of a speech or a seminar or a keynote or a presentation, business presentation, other presentation that you might be doing in your community, civic group, church group, whatever it might be. Talk to us about content and then talk to us about crafting.
Well, content, as we've talked about, you need someone else to hear your stories and your vignettes because they will point out, wow, that's fascinating. That's interesting. What's the point? And if there's a point in there, you've got a story that's sellable in a business context. As far as crafting it itself, I typically avoid the word hero anymore because it's so overused. But a good story talks about, and this is from a business standpoint, The client or the customer is the main character. This is the person who's living his or her ordinary life. Let's say it's Sally. Okay, she's in my world of speech coaching. Sally comes to me because she's been pushed out of her ordinary world. She's been told, you've got to give a speech in 30 days. Now she's not feeling comfortable. Even if she's somebody who's spoken before and she doesn't know how to put together a good presentation, she's now uncomfortable. That's the second part of the story. Once we've been introduced to the main character, is we've got to see this person being pushed into a new direction and doesn't know what to do. So for all of the listeners, think about who is your main character, your avatar, if you will. What is the problem they commonly face? Now that they've been pushed into that problem, they have to have a goal. In Sally's case, I got to give a speech in 30 days. And it's important to give us a definite timeline on the goal. Without that, we don't build any tension. In my old world of financial planning, if you're a financial advisor listening to this, somebody who just says, well, I want to retire. Okay, we all want to retire. Go quit your job tomorrow. You're retired technically. I want to retire in 15 years and I need $10,000 a month to do what I want to do. And my plan isn't on track for that. We've got a problem. That's when they're pushed out of their comfort zone. So we've got the character pushed out of the comfort zone. They have to meet a goal with a deadline. And along the way, they're struggling. They don't know how to solve it. Enter the guru, the guide, the problem solver. That's us in a business context. So we provide a solution. It's a plan. It's a formula. It's a format, something that gives them new insight and wisdom. They take new action, and then comes the day they succeed, which is the fourth part of the story. So we've got the main character who's in an everyday life. They get pushed out into this zone of discomfort, which is really where the conflict is. They've got the goal, and in the pursuit of that goal, they meet the guru, the guide. Now we have the success. It's like that's the finish line that we like to see, a moment where the person realizes, I made it. The person gives a speech. They sit down in their financial planner's office and says, oh my gosh, we've got a plan now. We will be able to retire in 15 years. The last part is one I usually see people leave out, David, but to me, it's the most important. It's what we call the new life. If you just show a moment of success, well, they may have succeeded, but they might go back to their old ways. What we've got to see is the new life where they've totally adopted and bought into the plan, the formula, the format that the guide provided. And now it's changed the way they live, the way they feel, the way they think, and it's permanent. Without that, the story doesn't have as much impact as it could on prospective clients.
Hey, good looking. Are you currently getting paid to speak? Would you like to ramp that up? We can help. Book a confidential speaker strategy call with our team at doitmarketing.com/call, and let's see what we might do together. The call is free, but the results may be priceless. So this was challenging when we were doing presentations in person. And I'm guessing that with the last 18 months or so of kind of pandemic and now post-pandemic, where the world is doing a lot more virtual, even as in-person is coming back, and it's coming back with a roar, which is fantastic. Did your clients have an easier time doing this on a virtual presentation, or did it add additional complexity and additional stress going virtual with a lot of the business presentations that you were coaching them on?
A lot more stressful. I had a sneaking suspicion in March of 2020 that people were going to be incredibly overwhelmed, stressed out by this. I was fortunate. Sometimes you get lucky in life. And one of my other mentors and coaches asked me in 2017 to start hosting a weekly coaching call with his organization. There are several coaches that we get together. Once a week, I would host the call. I had no idea what I was doing in 2017. He and I could not have known that he was preparing me for a pandemic in 2020. By the time it hit, I had given probably 300 virtual presentations, workshop coaching calls, and I'd made a lot of mistakes. Now, I mention that as a backstory because I had been trying to push people in 2019 to start doing more virtual one-to-ones. If you and I would have met at a networking event, I would have said to you, David, why don't we get online and have this conversation? Now, I know your backstory, you were used to this, but if you had never done this before, you probably would have said what most people told me. Oh, I could never talk to somebody on a camera. I've got to be face to face. So when 2020 hit, I knew that people were going to flip. The basic reasons were in the beginning, they didn't even know where to look. They got stressed out over that. And then once they figured that out, they tried to do what every virtual presenter I've seen does. They stand right in front of the camera and they don't move. They look either at the camera or they hide behind slides. And what we had to teach them was that virtual is a much more encompassing animal if you want to keep people's attention. You're very good at this. I've watched you do this for a year now. You get on, you show your face, then you go to a slide, then you ask questions, then you send them to chat boxes, then we did breakout rooms. I mean, it is a skill like a ringmaster at a circus sometimes. We have to constantly be in motion because that's where people are conditioned to be now as far as audience members. And if we don't do that, we're going to lose them. You're a professional speaker. You have more experience than I do at this, but see if you agree with this statement. I think we need to put in 2 to 3 times the effort on a virtual as we do live to have the same impact.
Completely agree. Completely.
It's a lot of work. But if we want to succeed as speakers, especially, we have to get good at this because it's not ever going away.
So let's talk about this in 2 different pathways. One is the seasoned in-person presenter, what you might teach them, show them, mentor them as a client of yours in the virtual world. And then someone who maybe is just coming into a new job or a new situation where they have to present a lot virtually, and maybe they did not have a lot of 3D in-person presentation skills background. So sort of like the seasoned presenters guide to virtual presentations and then the newcomer's guide to virtual presentations. First of all, do you coach them and teach them differently? Are there 2 different paths? Or is it really, hey, folks, gentlemen, this is a football. Do we all start with the basics no matter what our offline experience has been?
I think what you just said, the latter, is really where it is, because I feel like the pandemic created a reboot in the speaking industry, especially. We were so used to doing our thing on stage. We all have our own style. This is a different animal, as you know. I'm a big believer, and that's just for me personally. I get more energy of standing. I'm doing this interview standing. I do my coaching standing. I think that's something people should consider. Now, with that said, you've got to have the room to do it. So create a space for yourself. I saw Dan Thurman a few months ago. Now, there's somebody. Dan, if you don't know Dan, he is a Hall of Fame speaker, performer. He's all over the place. He has that capability. Maybe not everybody does, but if you can create a space where you can develop a presentation where you're moving forward, you're moving backwards, you're going left to right as much as you can within the grasp of the camera. But a lot of seasoned speakers really have struggled with this as much as newcomers. So from that standpoint, the technical aspect, I treat people the same. The big difference with the brand new presenters versus experience is experience understands you've got to internalize that message before you worry about delivery. Without a good message, I don't care how good you look. I don't care how polished you look. And that's the biggest difference I see between amateur and professional. The amateur a lot of times thinks, well, I can wing it, or I just need to go over a couple times. No, you have to internalize it, because when something goes wrong virtually, and I promise you it will every time, you can't be worried about what was I going to say next. That has to flow out of you. You've got to be ready to deal with the technical issue.
Let's talk a little bit about this interaction and kind of the complexity and the layers of a virtual presentation, because I totally agree with you. And even some presentation skills folks back pre-pandemic, they were saying that a really great presentation is not a one-way data dump. It's a conversation with the audience. And it's not literally a conversation like there's back and forth, but you're tapping into their experience. You're soliciting their memories. You're engaging them on a couple of different levels. Now that we're virtual, or now with virtual presentations, when we do virtual presentations, you literally have a chance to make it a conversation with a group. Whether there's 30 people, 300 people, or 3,000 people, with things like breakout rooms and chat and interaction and typing and thinking and responding. What are some of the basic things that take a virtual presentation from a one-way data dump to a really interactive, engaging experience?
Well, you've mentioned several, the chat box, the breakout rooms. I'm a huge proponent of polling. I love polling. So I think surveys are a terrific tool, but they've been so misused now in our society. I'm not sure about other countries, but here in the States, it's awful. If you sneeze, I'm going to survey you. Hey, David, how was that tissue that you used? Can I just take 3 minutes of your time, which becomes a 30-minute inquisition? No, don't do that. But polling is great in the middle. You've got their attention. You've got their interest. Capture what they're feeling and thinking in that moment. The other it's really important, is to get a co-host whenever you can, because that helps you stay present and focused on your audience. Co-hosts can deal with some of the technical issues and monitor the chat to ensure that you're getting good feedback and that you're answering timely and important questions. The other thing I've noticed, there are people that I would consider chat box extroverts. They desperately need to have their voice heard. Let them do it. That doesn't mean you have to respond to everything they're saying. And if they have side conversations going on, that's great. That sparks an idea. That's fine. Let them do that over there. I think if we shut that down, we're alienating them. Now, on the other hand, there are some people who are chat box introverts, right? We've got to give them an outlet, which is why I love the small breakout rooms or the anonymous polling. I've come to this conclusion in the spring of this year that I believe when we go back to full live presenting, a lot of speakers are going to be shocked because they think we're going to go back to, I speak, you listen. I speak, you get inspired. I speak, you take action. I don't think we're ever going back to that, because we've been conditioning audiences now, David, to be interactive with us, to truly make it a conversation, as you said. If I think we're going to go back and just talk at them like we used to, they're going to rebel. They're going to rebel by picking up their phones. They're not going to pay attention to us. We have to take the technology that we've been using and bring it to the live stage to make them a part from start to finish. I haven't heard anybody else talking about this, but we're easily conditioned animals. Right? A year and a half of conditioning of being part of a presentation virtually is going to make us think, oh, well, why am I not part of this one? Just because you're standing in front of me again like we used to. I need to have my voice heard.
What a great episode. Wowza. Tell you what, if you want to ramp up your revenue as an expert who speaks professionally, you should really check out our free online training at doitmarketing.com/webinar. Do you think that means that we'll be using more sort of in a live presentation, in-person presentation, using more interactive tools, survey tools, tools like Mentimeter and some of these other kind of audience polling, audience interaction, audience voting systems? Because that was, there was a small, tiny segment of big proponents of that pre-pandemic. Now, as you say, we've been conditioned that speaking happens on a screen. And there's all kinds of digital interaction and back and forth and back and forth. Now we go to in-person, and unless we're using technology in a very mindful way to make it highly interactive, highly experiential, it's going to go back to being a much flatter, one-dimensional experience. What are you seeing with the use of technology, polling systems, interactive audience engagement, now that we're coming back into a live setting?
That's exactly what I'm seeing. And it's interesting you mentioned Mentimeter. I saw Anna Leota use that when she was president of the NSA, 3 years ago. And I remember sitting there thinking, oh, that's really cool. I'll have to look into that. Well, that means I'm not going to do it, right? Well, I was dabbling in it when the pandemic and the lockdown hit, and all of a sudden I was reintroduced to it, and I remembered how cool this was, but it wasn't just the cool factor anymore. It was, oh, here's a great way to capture and keep their attention. And absolutely, I'm seeing that more and more people are doing that. One of my friends, she's actually teaching an 8-week course on how to better use tools like Mentimeter. Because if you don't use that, again, you're going to alienate your audience. And they're not even going to know why in many cases. I think they're going to feel like, boy, that was just kind of boring. And they may not even consciously know why, but they've been conditioned to answering questions and expressing their opinions in chat boxes. So absolutely, the speakers who are on top of this are going to take advantage of this technology. Again, not everybody will, because it's tough to learn how to use this and do it in a way that's fluid, that you don't constantly have problems and issues and you're stopping your presentation because of technology. It takes a lot of work, and only the most committed are going to do it.
Yeah. Quick funny story, and I'm wondering how this is going to play out in our in-person setting. This was 10 years ago. We were at some group of friends were at an event, and we decided to start a texting group. So, you put 8, 10 people into a text thread on your phone, and then we would go to these various sessions. Now, sometimes we were in the same session and like, oh my God, this guy's great. And like, holy smokes, who dressed this guy this morning? Where did he get that blazer? Yuck, right? So we're having kind of like the back channel. Sometimes we were in different rooms. So we were like, if there was a breakout session, someone's in breakout session A, someone else is in breakout session B. And like, my breakout's kind of boring. Oh, no, this guy's great. Come on over here. Let's. I'm thinking back to that with this insane sense of nostalgia.
Yes.
We do this now on Zoom, either with texting or Facebook Messenger or right in the native platform. If the Zoom room is set for private messaging between audience members, when we go back to in person, that's gone. Even the praise, I'm not talking about being a wise guy and making, derogatory comments about someone's clothing choices. Like, oh my God, I love that story. Holy smokes, this reminds me of something that we ran into at work. This is so great. We should hire this guy. I personally want that back channel, right? If I'm a pretty good speaker, you're a pretty good speaker, we're all pretty good speakers. I want people to be texting each other or messaging each other in some way, shape, or form. Hey, this guy would be a great guy to bring to our national sales meeting. Hey, she would be awesome to bring to our leadership team. Hey, I wonder if this guy does coaching on the side. I would love to coach with him. I want my audience saying those things, Michael.
Yes.
What is the facility, or what have you seen that allows that sort of back channel community conversation as a presentation is happening in real time?
Well, you can encourage them through like Mentimeter. You can give them an opportunity to post comments and they'll show up on the board. So everybody gets to publicly see. Now, if you're not doing a good job, that may not be a good thing for you. Is this guy for real? Where did they dress him? Yeah, you may not want to see that. But I would encourage people. I mean, you and I can think back to a day when we would have considered it rude to see somebody on a phone. Then it gravitated to, well, maybe they're tweeting that this is a good speech.
Maybe they're taking notes.
Maybe they're taking notes. And now it's just full on, hey, I want them participating. If we're still offended by people having their phones out during our presentations, we haven't kept up with the times. And that's how we encourage them. Hey, go on social media, make comments about what you like here. That's what I would do. I would encourage them to use it and have that technology that allows them to post comments, do polling questions, use the technology. Don't fight it, because they're going to use it anyway.
Let's mash up these two concepts that we've been talking about. How do you feel storytelling has changed or needs to change, if at all, in the face of this kind of virtual presentation, highly interactive, highly engaging, back channel, front channel, participatory way? Does storytelling need to change? Do we need shorter stories? Do we need to take breaks more? What do we need to do to make our stories more effective in this virtual context?
You're the first person to ask me that. I don't believe the story elements have to change. I once heard Doug Stevenson, a great storyteller, say, if somebody asked him, how long does the story need to be? He says it's as long as it needs to be and no longer, which means you've got to have those key elements. You've got to have this relatable character who encounters a struggle, who has this goal that she wants to achieve, doesn't know how to do it, and meets this guide along the way who gives some wisdom and advice. She makes some changes, takes actions, accomplishes her goal, and she's got her new life. Well, that might take 3 minutes. It might take 7. It might take 10. We've just got to make sure that we're not producing so much backstory that people are going to sleep. Get us into the action as quickly as possible. But I don't think it changes. The way we deliver it doesn't change. If I'm recreating a story to a camera, I'm going to do it the same way I am to an audience. Now, we may have to be a little bigger on stage. However, so many events today are being live streamed. We have to look at a camera. One of the biggest things we teach people and have been for a few years is when you're in a big event, do not speak to your audience as much as you do the camera. The reason being, most people in that large audience are not looking at you. They're looking at the screen because they're conditioned to look at screens. But really, I don't see a lot of difference. The elements of the stories have to be the same. Don't put in fluff or extra. Keep us on the timeline. But other than that, don't worry about it. It's the same story. I guess there is one exception to that. If you want to create an interactive story where you have people involved, that may come along. But I just think the story elements are what they need to be, whether you're in person or on camera.
So what you're saying is because the power of stories has not really changed in about 5,000 years, you think we're okay to kind of leave it alone for now too?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we're okay. Yeah. That 5,000-year trend seems to be still going in the same direction.
Seems to be holding strong, people. It's holding
I think so.
strong.
Absolutely.
Very nice. Well, Michael, as we're wrapping it up, I've got two final questions for you. The final question is going to be, how can people get connected and stay connected to more Michael Davis brilliance? But before we get there, second to last question, if folks were to take one overarching concept from sort of the state of speaking today, whether that's about virtual, whether that's about stories, whether that's about anything else, what's torn from the headlines with your coaching and your training and your mentoring that you're doing? What's the one overarching concept you would love to leave people with?
You have valuable stories that people need to hear, but you cannot create them on your own. You're too close to them.
Amen. I can back that 1,000%. 1,000%. In fact, I remember I was doing one of my speeches that I've done multiple times, and I've had friends in the audience. One of my friends says, hey, and sometimes you don't want to hear this, can we talk about your speech? I said, sure. He says, you know that story that you have in the middle? And I'm like, yeah. He goes, dude, that's your closing. That's the closing story. That is the most powerful, most impactful, most emotion-rich story. It's buried in the middle, and then you go and do more content, and that needs to be moved to the end. Never even occurred to me. Literally never occurred to me because, Michael, like you said, way too close to it. The next time I did the program, I rearranged some things. I closed with the story that used to be in the middle. World of difference. I could feel it instantly. The audience reaction, the audience evaluations, the sales, frankly, the people that came up to me afterwards and says, oh my God, that story was so incredible. That was so amazing. Do you ever work with people privately? It's like, yes, I do. Do you ever,
Yes.
Can I hire you? That went up. Everything went up. And I couldn't see it. And at that time, I had been doing this for 15 years. So I was far from a newbie, still couldn't see it. So I completely agree with you.
Well, here's a final thought for your listeners. If you're brand new to David's podcast or you've been listening for years, David is a certified speaking professional. And what he just said backs up what I've been saying. He couldn't see the power of his own story, or at least the position of it. We need others to help us see what we can't see, because we each have blind spots in our speeches and our stories.
Yes. Amen. Now, let's talk about speaking CPR and how can people get connected and stay connected to more Michael Davis brilliance. Where can we send people? You've got some gifts, some downloads. What can we give them?
Absolutely. They can go to my website, speakingcpr.com. Contact me, mike@speakingcpr.com, if you have any presentation or story questions. And I have a complimentary resource that's called 52 Storytelling Tips. It's 52storytellingtips.com. What it is a series of weekly 5-minute audios, just tips. And I'm not a big believer in the fire hose method of coaching. So just one tip per week comes right to your email inbox. And the idea is to build the skill. And within a year's time, you'll be at least 3 times more effective at storytelling. So feel free to go there. Be happy to share this with you.
52storytellingtips.com.
Yes, sir.
That's the place to go. Michael Davis, you're awesome. So great to have you on the show.
Same to you, my friend. Thank you for having me on.
Well, that wraps up another episode of The Speaking Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on iTunes. Subscribe. Tell a friend. Go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thespeakingshow.com. See you next time.